The session is recorded, so for anyone that wasn't able to attend, it will be sent out to you as well. And obviously, please do feel free to share that with any colleagues that weren't able to come as well. But we'll get started on today's webinar, which is about protecting vulnerable residents and Zetetick Housing's data-led approach to overheating. So today we will be exploring how Zetetick use the data-led insights to better protect vulnerable residents, reduce overheating risks, and drive energy efficiency improvements across their homes. But just before we start, please do feel free to ask any questions throughout the webinar. There is a Q&A box in the top right-hand corner of your screen, and we'll have time at the end to answer these as well. We've just got a couple of polls that will pop up throughout the webinar, so please do get involved as and when they do pop up. And then at the end, there will be a short survey. So if you have the time, we'd really appreciate you answering this for us, because we really do value your feedback. So we've also got our next webinar scheduled for July. If you'd like to scan this QR code that is on screen, or you can visit our website, you can register. The next webinar will provide an in-depth look at Switchee's intervention analysis report and how it helps housing providers understand the real impact of property upgrades using property level data. In this session, Dan and Izzy will show how intervention analysis is being used in practice to evidence outcomes, improve accountability, and support more informed data-driven decisions across housing services. So as said, you can either scan the QR code or you can visit our website, which is just listed there on the screen to register. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Katie Hudson and I am the Business Development Manager here at Switchee. In my role, I work closely with housing providers to help them leverage real-time data and tackle challenges like damp, mould, underheating and overheating, helping to protect both their properties and their residents. And I'm also joined today with Lisa Purchase, who is the Director of Housing at Zetetick. Just a quick introduction,
yes,
Lisa.
Sorry, I'm listening. Sorry, Katie, I was just listening to you. I do apologise. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. A little bit about myself. I've been working in social housing now for over 30 years. Started off in general needs as a housing officer, generic housing officer, moved into specialist supported housing maybe about 25 years ago, working with all different types of client groups, whether that was young people or older people and everything in between, really. And I've seen a lot of changes in supported housing over those years, from especially around damp and mould, when we used to blame the tenant for the lifestyle that they led and all of that was their responsibility, to where we are now, to understanding much, much better on our responsibilities as landlords to keep our homes safe for our tenants, and especially tenants who are vulnerable and tenants who have who don't have the ability to do those things for themselves, and to the introduction of the Building Safety Act, and within that, obviously, of course, our Abbs Law. And then we've also got the conditions of the Renters' Rights Act and SHROA leaning on us as well now. So our responsibilities are more significant than they were before, and quite rightly, I think. So first of all, I'd like to thank you for joining. I know that these things take a bit of time out of the day, but thank you very much for coming. Zetetick Housing, we are a specially supported housing provider. We operate across London and the South East. We've got just over 200 tenants there or thereabouts, and properties to go with. And as a provider, we have responsibilities not only to provide safe accommodation, but also to understand what is happening inside our homes. We do regular inspections, quarterly inspections, and regular visits through the maintenance team that we operate, and various other officers within the business. Today, I'd like to share with you how we are using data from Switchee to better protect our tenants in line with those legislative and regulatory changes, and how it's actually made monitoring of data and information much more straightforward and simple through the technology that they provide.
Thanks, Lisa. So just before we start, a little bit about Switchee. So Switchee has over 10 years experience and over 130 customers. All of them are housing associations and councils. And we protect residents and your properties in real time by identifying the drivers, acting on the data, and improving the quality of life for people living in rented homes. We have two solutions that support social landlords, our Stick and Go Swift device and our legacy Switchee Smart Thermostat. With today's session focusing on protecting vulnerable residents using data-led approach to overheating, I thought it'd be good to just go through some overheating stats as well. So during last summer, 19% with a Switchee device experienced a Switchee calculated feels like temperature of over 32 degrees in their homes, which was actually 110% increase from 2024 to 2025. And I don't know about you, but 32 degrees is quite hot for your home to be, unless you're sat by a pool. I'm not really that interested in that temperature. Also, over our most recent spring break weekend, 48% of homes with a Switchee device was recorded a heat index of above 26 degrees for more than 2 hours as well. We've got another heat wave on the way as well, so we'll keep capturing this data as this year goes on to be able to compare to last year's data as well. And within the UK, over 8 million people, either children or those over 65 and over, live in homes that are highly susceptible to extreme weather temperatures. Overheating in the UK is an escalating crisis. So studies show that up to 80% of homes in the UK now experience indoor temperatures that exceed comfortable and safe limits, largely because they were originally built to retain heat rather than release it. These stats focus a lot on overheating in summer, but overheating happens throughout the year, which is what Zetetick found out, that during even the colder months, overheating was still a really big risk factor. So Zetetick partnered with Switchee to better understand how heating was being used across its supported housing portfolio via our smart thermostat device. With energy costs rising and vulnerable residents at risk of overheating, the organisation needed a greater visibility into conditions inside the home. So using Switchee's real-time data and insights, Zetetick identified overheating risks, supported carers with temperature management guidance, and also improved the residents' comfort. The result was safer homes, lower energy costs, and a commitment to deploy Switchee across 100% of their housing stock to ensure that every resident was benefiting this ability. So we're just going to reflect on everything that we've just said so far, and we're going to have a poll that is going to pop up. So that should pop up on your screen soon with some options. So the poll is, what is your organisation's biggest challenge when managing overheating risk? So if you just want to select which option feels most applicable to your organisation, we'll let this run for a minute and then we can go through what people are saying. Getting good responses. Give it another 30 seconds before we see which one is the highest. Okay, it looks like there's no more coming in. So just from looking at the poll, out of all the options, identifying at-risk residents early enough is showing as, oh no, sorry, I'm getting the wrong one. Limited visibility, sorry, into what's happening inside properties, which is to be expected, to be fair. I think quite a lot of people don't have that visibility into homes. So it is something that we hear quite regular across the sector. I suppose without that real-time property data, teams are often reliant on the resident reports, reporting that they're overheating or reactive interventions. But what Zetetick did really well is that they moved away from that guesswork and went towards that proactive decision making using those live insights. So thank you for participating in that. There is another poll a little bit later on, so we let you know about that one. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass over to Lisa and let Lisa explain how Switchee helped benefit Zetetick.
Okay. Can we move on to the next slide?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. So listening to the information from Katie there, they were all of those reasons on that poll were why we decided that we needed to do something more sensible and to be able to manage some of those risks. We had identified overheating, and we had had a resident who had been hospitalised as a result of overheating in the property, which and also our trustees wanted to be more eco and look at ways that we could reduce costs around heating hot water in particular, and provide better services to our tenants. So we decided, we did a trial. First of all, we decided to do that trial and install the Switchee device, but we weren't driven by technology particularly. We were looking for practical solutions to three very real challenges. Firstly, we wanted to ensure that our residents were living in a safe temperature environment, and where we could identify homes that were either too hot or too cold, conversely. Secondly, we wanted to gain better insight into damp and mold and risks so that we could intervene earlier where possible. So we wanted to manage, we wanted to understand what was going on. And thirdly, we wanted to help residents avoid excessive heating costs through the use of gas electric for heating hot water. And what we've seen, actually, we did a trial. We did about 20% of our stock at the time. We did this trial, and what we found was, in particular, that we had a reducing cost on utilities. We have a bulk contract or a block contract with a single utility provider, so we get economies of scale, which we install in all our properties. But we have seen those costs reduce. It's difficult to track it completely. I'll be honest. I mean, that's one of the hardest things we found, because we have block utility contracts. We get lots of invoices and then lots of refunds when the meters are read, etc. So we've also moved to smart meters in a lot of instances, so that helps us with that. And we found the two things in combination. Actually, we were able to identify where we've got high spend or low spend, where it's not warm enough or not hot enough. So one of the most tangible benefits, actually, that we have been able to deduce is the reduction in utility costs, and we have estimated a per tenant per week saving of £10 to £15, which is not an insubstantial amount of money. It's £40 a month, which it can go towards other things, activities, or anything else that tenants want. And so we actually think that that discovery alone has made the whole process worthwhile, and going into that partnership. Next slide, please. So what did the data tell us? Well, the data told us that we had overheating risks in several properties, and that was something that we already knew had caused a problem with one particular individual, and so obviously we needed to get a grip of that. Some properties were consistently reaching temperatures that could present further health and safety risks for vulnerable tenants, and the data showed that some homes were maintaining high internal temperatures even when the heating systems were not actively operating. So they were over insulated, and we were trapping heat into the buildings that couldn't escape, I think, as Katie's already alluded to. So we started working with our care support providers, talking to them about overheating risks. We did several, we call them toolbox talks in our organisation. So we did several of those kind of communications with our partners to talk about what those risks looked like and what we wanted to do about it. And then we looked at continuous monitoring, and many of these issues we would just never have identified. We're not in the properties enough to identify those risks. And I think it's fair to say one of the most common issues that we certainly saw over winter months was care support staff on site in shorts and t-shirts or light clothing, because they'd got the heating on, and actually we didn't think that was acceptable. That was a high cost for our tenants, and put a jumper on was our response to that. So and that did really start to make an effort, because when we started to educate our care support providers around high temperature risk and also around cost, then we have seen behaviour starting to change. Next slide, please. So how do we use it today? Well, it's much more complex today. We have this platform now that we can see into our tenants' homes through these devices. It monitors temperature and humidity levels and humidity trends on the dashboard, and it makes for really interesting reading. What we actually did in order to make things more predictable is we set a maximum temperature. So the Switchee device would normally be managed by the tenant. In general needs social housing, the tenant themselves has full control over the Switchee device, and they can decide to turn the temperature up or down, either through the app or with direct controls with the thermostatic control based in the property. What we were finding is that whenever we went into the properties, the thermostats were turned up to the maximum temperature that they would go to, and instead of turning the heating down, windows would be open to allow for ventilation, and we didn't think that was a very efficient way of managing heating systems in properties. And so the government recommendation on heat is between, I think it's 18 or 19 degrees and 21 degrees, which is where we initially set the temperature. But what we found was that our tenants weren't warm enough when in cold snaps, and so we increased that maximum temperature to 23 degrees, and actually people are very comfortable within that temperature, and we don't find any kind of overheating issues at all now. No, we've got that maximum temperature, and we haven't received any complaints since we've increased that temperature. I think we also identified, because lots of our tenants are very vulnerable and are supported 24 hours a day within the community, that the night workers, where we had perhaps waking night staff, were feeling a little bit cold, and so we've also set a maximum night temperature of 21, and we've raised it from the initial 19 degrees that we set it at, because that wasn't quite warm enough if you were a night worker that wasn't being utilised at the time. Through using the dashboard, we can identify risks within the property. So we can identify damp and moisture risks in particular, and we can go and investigate. And we found in one case where we spiked a damp issue, that we had a leak. It was a slow leak under the bath. We wouldn't have found it probably until the ceiling collapsed, you know, because that's how these things work, isn't it? And so we found this slow leak under the bath. We were able to fix it. And as soon as it had dried out, we saw a reduction over time in those moisture readings. Obviously, because our tenants don't live independently, they live with staff teams, we see a higher level of moisture than we might see in a single occupancy property, because we might have 3 or 4 people in that property all through the day. So there's no break during the working day, for example, where people might be going out to work and houses breathe a little bit when they're empty, because that is a place of work for those members of staff, and they're breathing in and out, they're sweating, etc., etc. Moisture levels can be a little bit higher, but by reducing the temperature of the property, we found that that's not the case, and we can go on the dashboard and just check to make sure that all that's all right. It's also enabled us to highlight where we have got high running costs, any potential fuel poverty concerns, and where we can work with individual tenants that might be experiencing those issues, and also work with our energy supplier to help with those issues as well. One of the things we have identified is that we need to ventilate. So we regulate heat now, but actually our ventilation in some properties isn't as good as it might be. And so we've been speaking to Switchee about what the best solution to that problem is around heat extraction, moisture extraction through the properties, and we're probably going to be looking into enhancing extraction from properties to reduce the moisture in the home, so more passive extraction, that kind of thing. And I believe that there's a relationship with Ventaxia that connects to the Switchee devices that can then better monitor moisture within properties. But I'm yet to travel down that path, so you know, we'll let you know how that goes at a future date. I suppose more importantly for us, it helps us comply with safeguarding and health and safety requirements to ensure that we are meeting the new building regulations, and we are ensuring that we are well ventilated and heated, and our vulnerable tenants in particular are safe within their homes and not exposed to either too low temperatures or too high temperatures, or the risks of overheating or hypothermia, I suppose, would be the other end of that scale. Next slide, please. So current position is we're doing a 100% install. We've got about 50 properties installed at the moment. So the dashboard tells me, and we've got an ongoing. The full install is still underway. We're quite a dispersed organisation. We have stock in South London and across the southeast and into Kent. So we've got quite a wide, diverse geographical portfolio. And we also decided organisationally to install through the STIN programme that Switchee can offer, rather than tying up time of my officers or my maintenance team that have another job to do. We purchase the whole package, and the installation is done by registered installers through Switchee. I think the other thing to say, actually, in our experience, is lots of the comms came through Switchee as well, and so lots of the tenant engagement and various other communication methods to our care support providers and our landlords came through Switchee. Again, we're a very small organisation, and we don't necessarily have the resources within the organisation to be able to do a full campaign across all of our stock and installation, and so we've used the Switchee expertise, which they absolutely are, to help us to do some of that. One of the things that we found during our trial period, or through our an initial 20% period, was that when we were having the gas boilers serviced in particular, the Switchee devices, there's one placed on the boiler and one that connects to the thermostat, they'd lose connection because the boiler had been turned off for various different reasons. And so the boiler had been serviced and we got a new gas safe certificate, but the Switchee device had lost connection through to the dashboard and through to the monitoring. And so we'd identified this early on as a problem, and we'd sent out engineers a couple of times to kind of reconnect them, but that's quite expensive to do. And so what we've done in partnership with Switchee is we've produced some big stickers that we've put onto the boilers with the Switchee logo and the Zetetick logo on, and we've asked engineers or anybody that might be doing any work on the boiler at the end of that work to call this number and to be guided through the reconnection process back to the device. And what we found again is that because we've identified a problem and we've worked together to resolve it, that we haven't experienced the same level of disconnections and failure to reconnect. They do disconnect for whatever reason. We've also provided our maintenance team with a step-by-step guide on how to do it. It's quite simple, I'm told. It's quite straightforward. But so we've put some additional training in place for our staff, but also we've provided this telephone support number for engineers that might be doing work on boilers and stuff, and that's actually made quite a big difference. So I look at the dashboards about once a month or so. There's various other offices that do that too, and we've currently got one property that's showing that it is potentially at risk from high mold. This particular individual likes to shower very, very frequently, and this is where we've identified that we need to increase our moisture extraction from the building, because obviously we don't want to remove the enjoyment of showering from that individual. They can become quite dysregulated if they don't get an opportunity to shower as and when they want to. And so for us as the landlord, then we need to make amendments and improvements to the property to ensure that that air circulation continues as much as possible and we extract as much as possible. So we've recently identified that, and that work will go ahead quite quickly. It gives us an opportunity to do continuous monitoring. We can see if people are trying to breach the thermostat. They haven't managed to do it yet. We have managed to keep the maximum temperature at 23 degrees during the day on the thermostat. So the thermostatic control will absolutely control the maximum temperature of the radiators. And properties are comfortable when you walk into them. They're not over hot. They're not cold. They are a very comfortable temperature. People seem to be very settled within the heat regime, I suppose. We've also then got evidence-based decision making. So I talked about the needing to increase our moisture extraction, and we can do that because we can see very clearly from the dashboard that we've got an issue that we need to resolve very, very quickly. I think gone is the day when we blame the tenant for wanting to shower frequently. That's our responsibility, and the Building Safety Act tells us very clearly that it's our responsibility to ensure that properties are fit for purpose, especially when you're working with a vulnerable client group. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide today. I try to keep it quite brief. I suppose ultimately we've used the Switchee devices as intended, but it's not about sensors, thermostat kit particularly. It's about protecting vulnerable people, as I've said. And I think the biggest benefit for Zetetick has been the ability to move from being reactive to problems and issues that are happening, especially around damp and mold, to identifying risks early and being able to get into properties and say, we've identified a potential risk. Let's talk to you about lifestyle issues and what's going on. And then we can look at sensible and suitable options before we start getting problems with aspergillus mold or with rotting timbers, etc., and shortening the life of installation because we're just not keeping on top of moisture within properties. The biggest benefit, as I said, has been moving away from being reactive to identifying risks. And for supported housing providers like us, I think being able to demonstrate data, especially with issues like the Supported Housing Regulatory Oversight Act becoming a really important piece of legislation and regulation for supported housing providers like us, we are going to have a bank of data that is available to share with any inspection regime or any licensing regime that will come forward to us in the near future, and to say these are the actions that we take as a responsible landlord, as a landlord that is interested in their tenants and a landlord that wants to do the right thing for their tenants. So I suppose the question is no longer whether a problem has been reported. The question is whether the data is already telling us that a resident might need our help, and that's what we're going to do. So thank you very much for that. I know it was a bit short and sweet, but hopefully you've heard stuff that you didn't know before. And if you've got any questions, I'll do my absolute best to try and answer them.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Yeah, so just a reminder, the Q&A box is in the top right-hand corner. So if you do have any questions, please do pop them in there. But yeah, it's time for another poll, just while you absorb that. And so the next poll is, how confident are you in your organisation's current ability to detect and respond to overheating risks? So that'll pop up shortly. We'll leave that on for a minute or so. Again, just select the option that feels best suited to you and your organisation. We'll let it run for a couple of minutes just to allow people to put their answer in, and if you're wanting to put a Q&A in as well. Give it a little bit longer. Oh, I think it's ended. So looking at the results, I'd probably say it's quite mixed in what people are saying, which again, I think really highlights where the sector is right now in regards to overheating. I think some organisations do feel a lot further along in their journey than others, while they're still trying to define their approach. But hopefully everything that Lisa's gone through today has helped bridge some of those gaps and given you some practical examples on what you can do. But yeah, that result's not kind of uncommon to what I might have thought. So we're going to go to the questions now. Just while you pop some questions in, I do have a couple myself actually for Lisa. So you mentioned obviously about damp and mold, and how obviously you started your journey with Switchee being very much about overheating risk, but my understanding is that's not a risk factor anymore. So you've started to change what you're focusing on now.
Absolutely. The overheating risk was the initial driver behind wanting to look at this solution, because we had, like I said, a tenant that had suffered from overheating in the property, became dehydrated, and ended up with, you know, a short spell in hospital. No real damage was done, but it really kind of made us look at that as an organisation. Like I say, we are quite a small organisation, and we know many of our tenants, not all of them, but we do know many of them, and that's you know, at that point we took that responsibility very seriously, and we saw this product as an opportunity to address that overheating issue, and also really high bills. We had very, very high utility costs at the time, that tenants were having to pay, and being, you know, not very happy about it. However, once we'd settled on a maximum temperature within a household that seems to be a temperature that people are very comfortable with, and that maximum temperature is set between certain hours, and I think the hours are something like 7 till 10 that is the maximum temperature of 23, and then between 10 and 7 the maximum temperature is at 21. And that seems to have fixed all of those issues around overheating, and it's actually something that we haven't had any comments from any of our any of our tenants or any of our care support providers about since. However, what Switchee also gives us is the moisture level monitoring, which would indicate there's a potential risk of damp and mold within a property. And of course, as you know, social housing providers, we all now know the risks of damp and mold in property, the health risks that damp and mold causes, and the potential for death, which of course we know was the driver behind the legislation of Awaab's law, and it's now integrated within the Building Safety Act. And so that has now become our new focus, actually. Rather than overheating per se, we are now looking at moisture levels and working on solutions to high moisture levels, especially in properties where you might have a single tenant but with a high ratio of care support staff, and that particular tenant who, as part of their daily routine or their self-regulation, is maybe having showers or baths regularly when they feel upset, or they just need to reset their bodies. And so we see a high use of water within our properties often, or where we have HMOs where we've got 3 or 4 tenants living in a shared property. We'll see high use of water, and so in those environments it is about getting the moisture out of the properties. Also, the staff, you know, will spend time mopping floors. There's a lot of washing up all the time. There's drying of clothes, etc., that all contributes to that high moisture value within properties, and Switchee is enabling us to look at that and start to find some solutions.
And I suppose because you're seeing these early signs earlier, the repairs are probably less expensive, because it's not going to be a roof falling through.
Yeah, it's not degrading the building, because we're getting on top of it much faster. And it might just be that there needs to be general ventilation within the property. I know that, you know, lots of houses, they never open the windows, and it's like, it's a beautiful sunny day. Can we ventilate the property? Can we let it breathe? But also, modern construction has very high values of insulation, with fewer opportunities to ventilate, because we like to seal everything, and that's actually causing problems around heating, but also moisture retention. And I think that's our bigger problem now. Overheating is not a problem for us organisationally. Our biggest problem now is getting moisture away from the property. But we are seeing, because we are starting to tackle some of that, we are starting to see less damage as a result of damp and mold and rotting timbers and plaster falling off the walls, because, you know, if we can get the moisture out faster and better, it's just a more healthy living environment for both the property and the person.
Yeah, and also going from, you mentioned obviously the temperature caps that are in place, and I know when we first looked at the trial, it was 21 degrees was just not warm enough.
Yeah.
But did you find that there was a big increase in cost going from 21 to 23, or did it not really change anything?
I think that's, you know, as I alluded to earlier, because of the way that utilities work, and you get 100 invoices and 150 payments back and what have you. And also the temperature will make a difference. So the external temperature, if you're having a bad summer, we'll obviously see a higher use of services. If it's a nice warm heat wave, obviously the boiler won't come on to heat the house because it's already at 23 degrees. The thermostat will pick that up and it won't start then suddenly running radiators. And so we are seeing, interestingly, a stabilization of costs, and I'd say that that's probably akin to a reduction in costs given the current geopolitical environment that we're in and the access to gas and electric. And so we're seeing costs rise exponentially. We know that is happening all through the UK. So but we're not seeing that as an organisation. Our costs seem to have stabilised. So where they may have gone up in other places, we haven't seen that. So I would class that as a reduction almost, or certainly at least it's not costing us anymore. And so it's not costing our tenants anymore. So and we've had the same utility charges through service charges through ineligible service charges for the last 2 years. So they haven't seen an increase in their service charges. In fact, they've seen a reduction in their utility service charge because we've got a better understanding of what's going on where.
That's amazing, and I suppose every little helps when it comes to saving money.
Yeah. I mean, we think we've got about a £10 per person per week saving in utilities. That's across the board. That's water, electricity, and gas. But a £10 a week saving is £10 a week. That's £40 a month. You know, that's not it's a shop. Yeah, it's a bag of shopping, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, that's these days, and that's the reality. A bag of shopping is 40 quid now, there or thereabouts, depending on what you're buying, and so it's almost like an extra bag of shopping that we're providing for people.
So we've got some questions in as well from the audience. So what surprised Zetetick most during rollout?
What surprised us most? I think what surprised us most initially was the level of overheating risk. We were really surprised about how high the temperatures in the properties were. I think when Katie was talking before about 20% of properties having an internal temperature of 32 degrees and above, we were finding that, and initially, until we put a maximum temperature in, and you wouldn't do that in a general needs setting, the tenants would regulate it for themselves. But I would say very clearly in the supported housing setting, we were seeing members of staff turning the thermostats up as high as they would go and just leaving it there and opening the windows rather than turning the heating down. And it's that thing, isn't it? It's not my house, I'm not paying for it. And so when we started that education program, we saw a bit of a change, but really it didn't really filter down. And so in the end, we wrote to all our care providers and said, you know, we're at risk of overheating, of our tenants overheating, at needing treatment, at needing to go and see, you know, medical professionals because of dehydration or other complications as a result of their complex health issues. And so we told them we were going to cap the heat to initially 21, and it wasn't warm enough. It wasn't warm enough for people of a sedentary life. So if people weren't able to self-mobilize, or they were in wheelchairs, or various, you know, had reduced mobility, they were cold, and you know, there were blankets over their knees and fleeces on in their living rooms, and actually we don't want that either. We do want people to be able to sit comfortably in their own home, and so we increase that temperature, like I say, up to 23, and that seems to have done the trick. You know, people are quite happy to sit in a jumper. They don't want to sit in a coat, I think, and we seem to have found that sweet spot between overheating the property and it being too cool for people to be in comfortably. So I think yeah, that initially that was absolutely our biggest surprise, is how hot the houses actually were.
And how did the carers respond to Switchee being installed?
I think there was a mixed response. I think the organisations, the senior leaders within those organisations completely understood what we were saying and why we were saying it, and they got it, and they were passing that message down to their staff. Some of them not so happy, and initially we did find, certainly in staff sleeping rooms, like oil-filled radiators, that kind of thing. So they'd boost their own heating, and we've asked them to stop doing that and just to rely and to trust in the devices. And we've seen less and less of that, but we do still find it when we're doing property inspections, and we tell people to remove them because it compromises the overall heating in the property. So if you've got one room that's really much hotter than everywhere else, and we've got, you know, thermostatic radiator valves and all that kind of stuff, then it compromises the heat of the house. And we were finding it was impacting on the overall household temperature because you've got this one room that's at 35 degrees or whatever it is that people feel the need to heat to. So we do still find that as a problem. We do still talk to our care support providers about that. And in fact, we've got a care support provider webinar coming up, and we will be talking to them again about overheating within properties and who pays the bill, and, you know, do we start charging the care support providers if the bills suddenly start spiking out, because that's often the reason that they're so high, because our tenants, and with their vulnerabilities, actually don't have the ability to put additional heating into a property. They don't have the ability to turn a thermostat beyond where it should go. They're not equipped with the skills to be able to do that. So we know it comes to the care support providers. So, you know, we have said we'll charge them if we start to see high bills coming back through again. And that message seems to be a little stronger.
Yeah, I can imagine. What was your biggest lesson learned during implementation?
I think let the professionals do the install. Don't try and do it yourself. We're a small organisation. We just didn't have the internal resources to be able to do it. I think we tried it. We tried to do some of that stuff, and it was just like, oh, hang on, we're not doing the things that we should be doing. So I think I would certainly go down the path of letting the install happen through the specialist installation teams, because they're in and out in 20 minutes, and we were like half a day, you know. So for us, that was much more sensible. Even though it has a cost attached to it, but once it's done, it's done. And we were able to negotiate quite a nice deal for us, to be fair. So that's what we did.
If you were to do anything differently, what would you do?
I don't know if I'd do anything differently. I think one of the things I'd absolutely recommend is to do a trial. I think that for us really showed us the benefit of the equipment and what it could do for us organisationally, and how it could help us tackle some of the problems that we were experiencing. More around damp and mold, we thought, than around overheating, but we've managed to whack-a-mole both of them at the same time. So that's good for us. Yeah, I think that's what I would say. I would do that.
And do you have any advice for anyone starting their overheating strategy?
Talk to tenants. Talk to your tenants. If you've got vulnerable tenants, talk to the family of tenants and get their opinion on what the property's like in terms of thermal comfort. Is what I would say. That's where I'd start. I'd probably start with some sort of customer engagement. It's really good as well for meeting the customer standards. So I'd start with some sort of customer engagement about the overall temperature of the property. Is it, you know, what's the thermal comfort of the property? That would be my starting point.
Got one here that says, would you recommend air source heat pumps in order to cool a property? What sort of sustainable options are available to tenants? I'm not sure if you have any air source heat pumps.
I don't really. We do have one property with an air source heat pump in, and it's been testing, shall we say. I think it's been a real learning curve organisationally for us. It was installed by the builder. We didn't install it. I don't know enough about air source heat pumps. My only experience of them, I have to tell you, hasn't been brilliant. It is difficult to maintain a property temperature. I've used them in sheltered housing schemes in previous roles. Not terribly successfully. They're quite noisy. They hum all the time. So if you've got people that are very sensitive to noise, they can be a source of dysregulation in my experience. But the technology improves all the time. You know, I'd say do your own investigations. Where we have got one, we've managed to find the balance with it now, but it's taken us probably 12 months to get there.
Yeah.
But, you know.
I suppose to add to that, with my experience from dealing with other housing associations in the air source heat pump journey, yeah, it is very challenging because residents don't necessarily understand how to use it. But I think air source heat pumps, obviously, we can connect to an air source heat pump, and we would recommend that a schedule is set So the air source heat pump is being used in the most energy efficient way, rather than it being used like a typical gas boiler, which is usually when you tend to get your issues. In regards to cooler property, I wouldn't be able to answer that, unfortunately. But yeah, air source heat pumps, the technology is getting better and better, and we are having housing associations having good success with Switchee and air source heat pumps as well. How did Zetetick address tenant pushbacks from these monitoring procedures?
We didn't get a lot because we did a lot of tenant consultation, so it wasn't really tenants that were pushing back. It was the care support providers that wanted it to be 32 degrees. And that's where our biggest resistance came from, actually, not from tenants, and not from tenants' families either. We survey our tenants every year, and we ask them questions around property condition. We did ask about thermal comfort, and we didn't really get anything that really raised any questions for us, that worried us. The most pushback we got was from our care support providers, not from our tenants, interestingly, or from our tenants' families. And that's actually the acid test, because for those people who work in a supported housing environment, you will know that where a tenant has good support from family, they are absolutely on you, because they want the best for their relative in whatever shape or form that is. And so not getting pushed back from family members actually was very gratifying, and we knew we were on the right path.
I think it's highlighting the education, making sure they're educated on why it's getting installed, and then also ensuring they understand the benefits of why it's been installed. Typically help stop any pushback, is what we found. If you kind of force it on them and they don't have a choice and they don't know about it, then
we would expect pushback. Actually, I just remember one of the things we also do. We do a couple of large tenant events a year, 2 or 3, and we ask Switchee to come and have a stall stand, and we get the last one we had was at Christmas, and I think the person I was chatting to them afterwards that came to do it, so they got 2 or 3 care support providers coming up to them to kind of question how it worked, because they didn't quite understand it within the property that they were working in and wanted more knowledge. And so part of that ongoing education process is that we always ask Switchee to attend our larger tenant events, so that they can have those interactions with either family members or care support providers, or in some cases the tenants themselves.
And then got, is the panel aware of any education for residents to inform them of IAQ mold dangers and how to mitigate?
It's tricky within a supported housing environment, and with the so we provide housing to the learning disability community and autistic people. So lots of our tenants are non-verbal. Lots of our tenants wouldn't recognise some of those high risk factors, and that's why we go in on a quarterly basis and we'll identify high risk factors before. And Switchee now also enables us to identify high risk factors before we've even done the visit. And we spot things, we do still get black aspergillus when you've got furniture pushed up, beds in particular pushed up against the wall and stuff. So we'll still go out and do mold washes, but we're not experiencing the same level of problems that we were doing by any stretch of the imagination. And then we will talk to care providers about ventilating rooms. So often windows will have vents on them that have been nailed shut. We're telling them to open them and just to allow some air circulation, because obviously you get condensation on windows, etc. And so with a managed consistent heat and with better extraction of moisture, we're finding that the incidence of damp and mold are much reduced. We do still get them, I'm not going to pretend we don't, but they are much reduced in the properties where we have Switchee.
Brilliant. I think that might be all the questions. Obviously, if anyone's got anything else, please do feel free to just pop one in. I think that was a really insightful session. Thank you so much, Lisa, for that. I think it's given everyone some good food for thought, and definitely with obviously the heat waves coming and potentially more overheating risks, and obviously how it does impact the residents' safety. I think that's been really, really valuable. So yeah, so I think that's everything really from us. Just a reminder, if you want to join our next webinar in July, here's the QR code, or you can visit our website. If you do have any questions, please do reach out to Switchee directly. If they're more for Lisa, we're happy to pass them along to her. But we are always here to help with finding the right solution for your housing association, whether that's using Switchee smart thermostat or using our Swift device as well to help manage and monitor these overheating risks, as well as damper mold as well. So yeah, I hope you found it insightful, and you can now hopefully see how data can really help support healthier, safer and more energy efficient homes for vulnerable residents. We do have a survey, so if you don't mind, please can you take some time to complete this? We would really value your input. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening. I hope you found it useful. And as Katie said, if you've got any further questions you want to ask me, then please pass them through, Katie. I'm more than happy to answer. And I've given you 10 minutes of your life back, so hey.
Yeah, so you can complete the survey now and join the next webinar. Brill, thank you.
Thank you.